right there was an act of fear. Fear sometimes controls our life. It controls our thoughts, our ideologies, our actions, who we hang out with, what we do. It consumes our life. But the opposite of fear is courage. But what if I were to tell you that society defines courage as a huge act of bravery and limits what courage actually can be to something like running to a building on fire like firefighters constantly have to do, or slaying a dragon? Don't get me wrong, those are definitely acts of courage and they definitely are courageous things. But whereas fear can come into different forms, as in fear or stage fright, or being afraid of a spider, or afraid for your life, or fear of making a decision, fear comes in different forms. So why can't courage come in different forms as well? That's what I'll be discussing today. I will be discussing the different forms of courage and how it's personal to the person. Like beauty, in the eyes of the beholder, courage is different towards what that person is or what their fears are. And it doesn't have to be a huge act of bravery. I will then start off with going over the definition of courage. One of my favorite definitions of courage is from Sean McCabe, which basically says, quote, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it," end quote. Basically what this is saying is courage is not jumping off a cliff without being afraid of what will happen, or running in front of a car and not being afraid. No, not having fear is not what courage is. That could actually be defined as stupidity in some forms. Being courageous is acknowledging your fear and having fear, yet in spite of that fear, you are able to rise above it. That is what courage really is. Now we're going through examples of the different forms of courage. As you can tell, the title is red. That's basically to show that the color of courage is red, which is kind of ironic because red also symbolizes danger. And also, courage is the act of overcoming your fear of danger and being brave while doing it, and that's what courage actually is. In my first example, the example is an example of basically being your true self. In the picture, you see a woman with half her face scarred and half her face wearing makeup. Basically, by her sharing her emotionally and physically scarred face, she is being courageous because she is showing her true face and true self and being true to herself, despite the fear she may have over judgment and ridicule for her true face, and that is a true act of courage. And the other one has a picture of someone who is nervous when public speaking and one who is good at public speaking and doesn't seem to be nervous at all. The one who is nervous is the more courageous out of the two because he has a fear of public speaking, yet he's still able to overcome that fear and move from it, whereas the other person doesn't really have to overcome any fears when public speaking, making him not as courageous as the one who has to. Another form of courage people might not understand is going to the grocery store. I notice this might not seem courageous, but this actually can be courageous because for people who have anxiety about going to the grocery store, and that by going to the grocery store, they face their many fears, and that's actually a really courageous act. All of this just really goes to show that having courage and stuff doesn't mean you have to do something crazy, like I said previously, by jumping in a fire or slaying a dragon. It can simply be you overcoming your small fears, despite what they might be. It's personal for every person. Now that we've discussed what courage is and some examples of it in real life, I will now be transitioning in to explain the aspects of courage and how we can connect that within Reno High School and how to become better leadership in general. Some aspects of courage is basically to stand up for the minorities or people who are unappreciated. Standing up for people who are unheard shows courage because those opinions are contrary to the majority, which means you might have a lot of backlash of people who are contrary to yours, which can be scary for some people, having different opinions or other things to boost standing up, because you not only have to defend it, you also get those attacked, and that can be something scary. It's also basically courage to doing that, especially if your opinions are contrary, because it shows despite you don't believe exactly what these are, you're addressing those voices and those matters because you basically want to have everyone have a voice. And that's basically a certain quality that leadership should have doing that, and basically can really change the aspect that Reno High School has. And one way that we can do this as a Reno High School is we can do this by asking people that we normally don't talk to, who are in our cliques or groups or stuff. Another aspect of courage is basically to be brave and stuff in time of grief or pain. The third one is basically to be yourself despite society's norms or judgment, or despite them ridiculing you for who you truly are. What this will eventually do for Reno High School is that it will make everyone feel more included, like they have a spot here in Reno High School, that their voice is heard and stuff. By us just taking the first step, being courageous, by asking someone who you might not even know, who's not really a part of your group, asking them what they want to see different, and using your courage to ask them that, you can have an impact. By representing those ideas, even though they might be contrary to yours, you could have an impact. It might not be an impact for the whole Reno High School, but it can have an impact for that person. And for all I'm concerned, if we make a great high school experience for one person, then we are doing something right. In connection to basically standing up to the unrepresented, we can look at a basic famous figure within our society who does this, who did this and basically is really famous in our society, and that is Abraham Lincoln. During his time period, an unpopular kind of belief and people who were unheard were the slaves and people who were in slavery and stuff and such. The idea of slavery was actually morally accepted in many places, especially the South. However, Abraham Lincoln knew that this was wrong, and not only that, he was able to have the courage to go against popular belief, to go against the whole South. He was fearful, of course. He was fearful that the South would go away from the country, that slavery would still exist there. He was fearful of a war and battle between fathers and sons. He was fearful of the state of his country. Yet despite that fear, he knew it was correct, and he represented those people that were unrepresented, who didn't have a voice, and had the courage to do that despite knowing what the consequences might be. Within our school, we can basically advocate for those opinions of other people despite them being contrary to our own, and basically going against the social norms and stuff like that, to express those within leadership when we're planning spirit race and stuff like that. Because that shows courage. It's just we're able to go against the majority and go against everyone and do that for ourselves. And that will not only improve leadership in our school, it also can give those people an examples. If you give those people an example to what they should do in the future as well, and hopefully have an impact on their life. Another one that I want to discuss basically is to be yourself. Being yourself is one of the biggest acts of courage you could possibly have. Being yourself is wearing whatever you want, as long as the dress code, and just going out there and being yourself despite judgment, despite what people may think, and despite what people may do. It's basically to stand up not only for yourself, but for other people. Because to be yourself and realize just because what I am is not what everyone else is like doesn't make it wrong necessarily. A perfect person who does this within our class is Zion Ducey Perry. She is basically one of my idols for courage and stuff. For example, she'll literally go up to random strangers and compliment what they're wearing, or compliment them like their smile or something. For me, that is something I would fear, like going up to a random stranger, because they might think, I don't know, that I'm flirtatious, or they might think I'm weird or something if I do that and I don't know them. But despite that fear that she might have, I always see her, despite her not knowing these people, giving her compliments and stuff like that. And just being herself, being cheerful and happy just like herself. By her doing that, it just basically has made that impact on those people's lives. It made them feel a lot better. And we can do that as well within leadership. Just simply complimenting people and acknowledging people and stuff like that, and being ourselves can actually have a good impact. And it's one of the biggest things of courage, because whereas we are ourselves, we're also afraid of ourselves as well. And to be ourselves is the real courage. It's a real act of courage.
Oops.